Join Dalton and Jacob as they discuss the ever-changing world of trading card games. TCG Buzz starts now.
Hello and welcome to episode 7 of TCG Buzz. My name's Jacob, and this week I am joined by a very special guest. Joining me over the phone is Brandon Oramas. How are you doing, Brandon?
Doing great. How about yourself?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for taking some time out of your busy schedule to talk with me. I know you were really busy this week doing judging for Pokemon. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. Just got in a few hours ago and definitely exhausted, but it was a great weekend.
That's great to hear. The reason why I asked you to do this interview is, well, you kind of won the Chicago SpringFest for Buddyfight. I don't know if you were aware of that.
Oh, is that what that was? Oh, just thought that was a pretty big locals.
Yeah. So I just wanted to ask you a couple questions to really get to know what happened throughout SpringFest and what led to your victory. So the first thing I'd like to do is go over your deck a little bit. I mean, we don't have to look at specific cards, but my understanding is you were playing a Magic World Osmodai deck.
That's right.
My first question is, why did you choose that deck in particular?
Well, I was testing mostly this deck and Raging Spirits against Fifth Omnis, against different Hero World variants, and in mirror matches too. Now, I predicted a pretty aggressive meta, and much of what I was able to test with Raging Spirits just couldn't keep up the pace of play, and I tested several versions of this deck, first off. The very first version I tested had to do with filling up the field with size 2s, thanks to the effects of Solomon's Great Barrier. Now, that deck had some consistency issues. I was very susceptible to spell destruction.
That's what I see a lot in Great Barrier decks. But you chose the size 3 Osmodai deck.
I originally had a very focused size 3 Asmodai deck build that didn't even use inverse Asmodai. I had a very focused build. It had main decked That's How I Roll. It had main decked 100 Demon Sorcery Pathetic. And when I was doing more and more testing, I had a lot of issues with Shadow Dive. I had a lot of issues with certain builds that would be able to use effect destruction multiple times before actually entering the battle phase, and it would whittle away my hand. So I decided to try and test a little mixture of the idea of Weenie Rush, having a bunch of smaller monsters attack multiple times while still maintaining the giant center size 3, essentially a deck that would be able to be versatile, something that could take almost any matchup and focus itself on either of the two strategies.
It seems like that's something you definitely were able to do. What was your actual record in the Swiss before top 8? In
Swiss, I went 5-1, and I lost in round 4 to the Dungeon World list that ended up making top 8.
Now, besides that dungeon deck, were there any other decks you really had any trouble with?
Over the course of the day, the Dungeon World list was the one that gave me the most trouble. I played against Gojin Maru in round 1, and the Shadow Dive gave me a little bit of trouble. I was able to outpace it with penetrate damage, multiple attacks. Overall, it was a tough matchup for my opponent, especially in game 2, where I drew into 3 Magical Goodbye, which were able to not only get rid of the soul of the Gojin Maru he was able to grab, but put the Gojin Maru itself back in his hand and left him with only one other card to defend himself. So round 1 was pretty tough for him.
Your round 1 match against Gojin Maru, that was actually my co-host on the show, Dalton, and he came to me after the match. He's like, I just got my butt kicked.
Dalton's a great player, too. Now, I felt really bad, and I apologized to him after the fact. I normally, in testing, I had actually gone against Gojin Maru with the original size 3 build that I had focused on, and I had so much trouble with the matchup between the Shadow Dive and the multiple attacks, the 2-soul Gojin Maru, being able to withstand the several attacks that my Omnilord Asmodais were able to put out, if not for one more set, I don't know if I would have even had the record that I finished with.
Was there anything you would have done differently with your deck build now that the tournament's over?
The only thing I would have done differently is swapped out a set of side deck cards for something I put in my main deck. I was considering main decking the That's How I Rolls and taking out the aces. The issue being penetrate damage, being one of the greatest things that affected the deck. I opted to go ahead and keep the aces so that I would have more board presence and could use them to attack smaller monsters on the side that might have high power and low defense that would otherwise give me trouble, which I'm glad to say that actually ended up being the case, especially against Dungeon World, where I was able to use the ace to go after El Quixotes, to go after Tetsuyas, while still being able to focus my size 3's attacks on the opponent.
That seems like a really good idea, and I can totally see why you'd want to do that. My next question for you, you fought a lot of decks on Saturday, and I know throughout the rest of the weekend you fought some other decks that weren't necessarily in the tournament. Were there any decks you fought against that really surprised you or were something you weren't expecting?
I played against one of the best Death Ruler builds I'd ever seen, personally. I enjoyed this person's use of inverse Death Asmodai, the ability to not only swing at my Asmodai in the center for penetrate damage, but also the ability to Devil Stigma it and continue calling out more Death Rulers to go around my center after I'd whittled away resources to keep it alive was a very innovative play and something that I think demonstrates Magic World's capabilities for not only performing wonderful juggling tricks in its own world, but also being able to utilize the tools that other worlds offer.
From its release, I've been looking for decks that really utilize Death Asmodai, and I think people are finally starting to realize that he actually is a really good card, and then I betcha we're going to see a lot more of him being played.
I can definitely agree with that. I know a few Dragonine lists have popped up recently where they use a similar engine with the 100 Demon Sorcery spell from Ancient World that destroys your own monster in order to gain gauge and I believe draw a card, might be gain a life. And the aim for that is to call out an Ozzy Dahaka, essentially without paying the 3 gauge and sacking the monster. You're paying the 2 gauge and 2 life from killing and calling the Death Asmodai to get not only the 3 crit attack from Death Asmodai, but you're also getting the multi-target attack from Ozzy Dahaka and setting up Ozzy Dahaka to be destroyed over time and equipping Equal Iguanas.
Oh, that's just scary, dude. I don't even want to think about that. So my last question for you, now that you've dominated at SpringFest, how are you preparing for Continentals in California?
Well, doing the same thing I did for SpringFest. I meet up with my crew maybe once a week, twice a week occasionally, and we practice. We build almost every deck that can be considered meta or even tier 1, some tier 2 as well, just to get a taste of what's out there, always considering options that decks have, never limiting ourselves to testing to a particular list. We will occasionally alter our lists for things that other people with different play styles may opt for, so that when we sit down, we are better prepared for that. I'm definitely doing research on our special set that we're getting, so that I'm going to be aware of whatever is going to be out there and available to play at Continentals. The number one thing is preparation. Always trying to make sure that you have a thorough understanding of the deck that's being played against you, even more so the world and what the world has to offer for that deck. I played against the Dungeon World player, and I was very surprised by the amount of dungeon enemies and demon lords in what I would have already assumed was a pure adventurer's list based on some of the cards he was playing. And that goes to show you that there are all kinds of deck types, all kinds of decks, all kinds of tech cards that players of all different kinds of walks of life can prefer and do well with.
That's definitely some good advice. I know preparation is really, really important. And, with Continentals being right around the corner, but with some really crucial sets coming out right beforehand, I know you've got a lot of work to do. But I wish you the best of luck in Continentals. Everyone here at TCG Buzz will be rooting for you and hoping you do well.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for that. That means a lot.
I really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to do an interview with me. So thank you.
Don't mention it.
And I can't wait to fight you again. Maybe next time at Regionals?
Sounds like a plan.
All right. I will see you then. Thanks.
No problem. Take care.
Bye. Thank you for listening to this special episode of TCG Buzz. Dalton and I will be returning next episode. And until then, make sure to subscribe to TCG Buzz on YouTube to stay informed of future episodes. Make sure to like our page on Facebook. Visit our sponsors who make this podcast possible by visiting tcgbuzz.com/sponsors. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it on Facebook and Twitter with your friends, or you can submit a show review. You can do this by visiting tcgbuzz.com/7. That's the number 7. TCG Buzz is a proud member of Newsmakers Podcast Network, an ever-growing network of podcasts covering business and entertainment topics. Check them out at npcn.tv. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to TCG Buzz. New episodes can be found on tcgbuzz.com. Don't forget to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter. For box openings, deck profiles, and more, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel.